What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Katie Schibler Conn of Team KSA.com. Katie, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, a good one I did with Jason Swank, who we both know, and that's how we met. Jason runs an amazing group of agency owners. He talked about how he built up his agency to 8 figures and sold it. And then also a separate episode, how another company he's doing work with is buying up agencies. And so we talked about the valuation, the agency space, entrepreneurship. Those are good episodes. Also, I did an episode with Todd Taskey. So Todd Taskey, Katie, I don't know if you know Todd, but he runs the Second Bite podcast. He pairs agencies with private equity and he helps sell agencies. And it's called the Second Bite podcast because he's found when he's working with private equity and selling agencies, sometimes the agency owner makes more on the second bite than they do on the first because they sell to private equity. Private equity then sells again in a couple of years and they'll roll equity into that new entity. So it's a very interesting interview as well. Another fan favorite, I think, Adee Clevitt, she does done for you SOPs. So we geeked out on, I think you'll like this one, Katie, productivity, our favorite productivity tools, software, and everything like that. So that was a fun one. Check them out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So we call ourselves kind of, Katie, the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy so the host can, create amazing content, create amazing relationships, and most importantly, focus on running their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. And I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Katie Schibler Conn. She's the founder of KSA Marketing. KSA Marketing is an integrated advertising agency. They have expertise in workforce development, recruitment, and advertising for talent acquisitions. We'll get into some of those things. They serve higher education, government, and rapidly growing clients. Katie has an interesting background as a classically trained marketer, but also a retired yak farmer. Wasn't expecting that, probably. She also was a Girl Scout troop leader. That's on her resume. And an interesting fun fact is I think your daughter's middle name is Danger.
Correct.
That's pretty wild.
I
was reading, I forgot what book it was. It was Predictably Irrational or if it was a Dan Ariely book, but there was a book that talks about that there's a higher percentage of people named Dennis who are dentists. Have you read this before? So people fulfill sometimes their name. So yeah. I'm not sure what your daughter's like. If her middle name's Danger.
She's fulfilling her name.
Okay, there you go.
So this is not her first tour. She is strong-willed, opinionated, independent, climbing trees, always trying something new. So
we'll have to talk about why Danger, but also they've served clients such as Pepsi, Reed, Mass Hire, and many, many more. So Katie, thanks for joining me.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. Excited to be here.
Just start off with talking about KSA and what you do. And if people are listening to the audio, there's a video and we're going to pull up her website here. So talk about KSA.
So KSA, I founded accidentally 14 years ago after retiring as a yak farmer. And so over the course of 14 years, our client base and our agency service has changed. So we have served big brands because I am that classically trained marketer. And because I've been classically trained, I look at marketing as iterative. So especially when you're running advertising, it's a series of experiments that are helping you understand what the right message is, who the right audience is, how do you deliver the right results. So we have served PepsiCo for 14 years on a global scale. And then over the course of the past 7 years, really niched down into workforce development. And that comes from a personal passion of wanting to see all people connect with on the path that's going to lead them to fulfillment and prosperity. That may be a traditional path of going to a college degree, maybe going into a skills training program. We all have, people get into their careers and decide they want to switch. So a career is a living, breathing thing, and we're really passionate about connecting people to opportunity, and then secondarily getting our clients out of what we call the oh shit moment. So we
Hence
like
your
to say,
tagline here.
yeah, we like to say we help clients go from oh shit to hell yeah, and we do that with results that kick some ass. So all of our clients come to us in an oh shit moment, and then we
What are
focus.
some examples of their oh shit moments?
In the early days, it might have been they had a big production, or they had a big aggressive timeline, or they had a project they didn't know how they could rein and coordinate it. So more on the marketing enablement side. Other aspects might be that they're, for example, if someone's only advertised on social media, and as cookies go away and all that tracking changes, they are not seeing the same performance and the same results. Oftentimes people are targeting too specifically or too broadly, and they're not diversifying their media mix. So I'm a media nut. How do you crack that code and get out of oh shit? And that is really about having a goal and a clarity and running a series of experiments to get you closer and closer to what you define as hell yeah.
Talk about workforce development for a second for people who aren't as familiar with it.
Yeah, so it's really, fell into this, frankly. We had multiple clients that came to us several years ago. One was a registered apprenticeship program, and I had to learn about what it meant to be an apprentice. At the same time, we had started working with a university on their skills training programs. We're in Rhode Island, so General Dynamics does a lot of shipbuilding and submarine building here. So the workforce itself needed more skilled workers. And as a result, the universities were building skills training programs to feed into those bigger employers. And then we also had a client that was a small client, manufacturing client, and they were having issues every time we went to meet with them, where their production floor and their processors were leaving and sort of going on strike. And so I took a step back and said, okay, we've got 3 different clients sort of attacking the same problem in very different ways. What's the common denominator? So how do you create demand and desire for people to want to work at a company and a career, or pursue a certain path for employment or education, is really no different than how you create demand and desire for a consumer brand like PepsiCo. It's not something that you saw, or Pepsi. It's not something you solve overnight. You have to have a long-term plan, and you have to keep on making that progress and charting that progress.
So it's making the company attractive to retain and attract talent.
Yes, and it also might be creating an industry or a career. So like you look at something like manufacturing, we all have biases about what manufacturing was. I grew up in the Rust Belt of Ohio. My hometown, my grandfather worked on the line at Ford, and aunts and uncles and everybody worked in manufacturing. But then, that generation really wanted their kids to get a college education. So we pushed all of the nieces and nephews, and my family was pushed into a college education. Maybe not everyone was ready for it, or maybe that they're not going to learn in that environment. When you take a step back and you look at what's happened in manufacturing, we've had these perceptions that it's dark, dirty, dangerous. Or if someone goes into the military straight after high school, that they might be, that's because they didn't do well academically, and that is not the case. So really, we have to shatter some of those dated perceptions and bring awareness to different careers and industries. We can all want a college education and want to succeed, but if you can't thrive in an indoor environment and that feels like you're going to kill your soul every day showing up, then maybe you need more exposure to opportunities where it's going to keep you connected to the outdoors.
Yeah, that's really interesting because my perception of manufacturing is different actually when I think about it, just because my experiences. Like I picture like a polished concrete floor with like a plant and things coming off of it.
Yeah, and
So
it's such a, if you've been in a modern manufacturing environment, then you're spot on. Like that is a future forward tech driven environment, and people need coding and they need math and they need science. But that isn't necessarily what older generations perceive it as. So oftentimes parents are the barrier, or grandparents are the barriers to why so many people don't pursue careers there. And you look at the student loan debt crisis, and it just we've got to unravel and unpack all of that.
you mentioned workforce development, and one of those kind of the foundations and that you talk about is culture.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little about culture and how it impacts the recruiting and retention and the way you think about culture.
Well, number one is values. So if you don't have the right culture and defined shared values as an organization, it's extremely difficult to attract and retain the right employees and the employees that believe the same things that you believe. The culture starts and is felt. It's like a living, breathing experience at an organization. And so a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And those two pieces are so intricately connected that oftentimes we see people, the HR talent acquisition teams don't have a seat at the table with marketing and advertising. And so these decisions around what brand values are, organization values are, employer brands are being made either in silos by a talent acquisition team or by a marketing team. And when we connect those two, and then we start creating that demand and desire and really cracking the code of how why someone would want to be part of an organization, why they would want to consider a career, what those opportunities are. Then we take those same values and sort of the target audiences, and we start running digital advertising campaigns. And through series of advertising campaigns, we can start to crack the code on what messaging is motivating people to apply. Are these the right people? And then start tightening those targeting and unlock opportunities. We did a recruitment campaign for an urban school district where they needed more teachers of color that were could speak and teach in multiple languages, because they have multilingual learners, or learners who are learning English for the first time. And there was no way to meet that demand locally. And running those recruitment campaigns and really structuring the right profile of who would be interested in those careers, we were able to attract career switchers. So people who don't have traditional teaching degrees, but more than capable of it and could go through a training program. So whether it was a NASA scientist looking for like the next step where they wanted meaning in their career, there are lots of people changing jobs and looking at different opportunities. How you create that connection and create that opportunity is so important.
I can see how a very targeted campaign would attract someone. Are you a NASA scientist and you wanted to be a teacher? There's probably like a small group. Yeah. Like
right.
As you get really targeted, you can really speak directly to those
Right.
people. I'm not saying that was your only
Or
target or
whether it
anything.
was like, an apprenticeship program for, the life and plant sciences or etymology or stuff like that, where people are outside in the woods. And you've got these people who have these passions that, as maybe when they were kids, they were that kid that was digging around in the dirt and lifting up every rock to look at those bugs. And they forgot about those passions. And as we all know, you get tired and burnt out on a career. So the way that messaging can connect and sort of reinvigorate someone's interest in opportunity, to me, is why I could do this all day long. And I do just geek out about it
So I
constantly.
can see the recruiting side, right? So you're really speaking directly to the person, their wants, their needs, while kind of infusing it into the DNA of the company. So it's attracting
Mhm.
the right people. So now they come on board. Talk about the
Mhm.
retention side. What are some things, some examples of things you do or companies you work with on what they do to foster a good culture once they're there?
I think making those hiring decisions based on culture, really having open conversations. I mean, I know for us at KSA, we really look at like the 30, 60, 90-day first few stages of someone being part of our agency as, are they a cultural fit? Like that is more important than can maybe their technical skills. Because someone who has great technical skills but isn't a cultural fit, that's going to rock the boat and topple the apples. It's harder when people are in panic when it comes to hiring, and they have imminent needs like in healthcare or law enforcement. So sometimes we have to look at it as it's going to be a multi-year journey. So let's get a higher volume of candidates in the door, and then let's continue to work with you to optimize what those values are and start addressing where in your pipeline it's broken. And if you're not retaining them, why and what can be done to make them engaged and or relook at those values. Are they the right values?
What are some mistakes people make, Katie,
Um,
in the interview process
in
itself?
the for interviewing around jobs, I think oftentimes not being vulnerable and honest is a big mistake. One of the hardest things, especially I think during COVID, was you had a lot of people interviewing and everything was online. So some of those visual tells were things that would, be the nonverbal cues of someone's weren't as visible. So I think being really honest with any employer, hey, this is the job and I'm equipped to do this and I'm maybe need some help learning here, but I really want to be part of that organization can really change the dynamic of an interview. Everyone should go into an interview with questions. If you don't have questions about what the opportunity is or don't have questions about the company, then, you're not showing that you've done your homework to want to be engaged or that you're interested and excited about it.
Yeah, it's the same things obviously employers look for on that end, which is like someone who's actually done research, someone who's engaged, someone who's asking questions of someone that person's going to stick out more than someone who just kind of says yes and doesn't really inquire or is inquisitive.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, from a culture standpoint, what are some of the things you do at KSA that help with culture?
Well, we curse a lot, so I like to curse. And so when we're going through the interviewing process, and if I'm part of the interview, that's actually something I ask, like, like what's your favorite curse word? We have on our job descriptions, the number, like AI screens like certain things right now when you submit an application. So we have, how many times does the job application say shit as like a baseline of, if someone can advance in the career. And I think from that being a question on a screening call, I mean, from an application to a screening call and being consistent, we're creating that space where someone's like, okay, I can open up and be honest. If they are censoring how they talk, then they're not going to be a good cultural fit for us at all. Around our office, you'll find lots of random crazy shit and stickers like that say kick some ass and oh shit, and then always see people, like I walk through the office flipping off everyone in the morning, like with love. That's sort of
Welcome to the
like,
office.
some people give like a thumbs up, and I just go walking by and say those kinds of things with a big smile and with a hug, and that is what connects everyone. My staff has taken to celebrating people's birthdays really seriously. And I personally have a very detached relationship with my birthday. So, but I just let them do that because it's important to that. So yesterday, it was one of the guys' birthday. One of my key team members made homemade cupcakes for everyone. And just those little things that, like, the whole staff always signs a birthday card, shows that, we care and we take that time for our team. They had an Easter egg hunt like 2 weeks ago through the office, and to see adults tackling each other for candy, it just sort of takes that. We always say work hard, play hard internally. So we take the time to do things together as a team, own our shit, and get shit done. So we take those quick sort of cultural pauses throughout the week, and then just go right back to kicking ass on behalf of our clients.
Is everyone in person, or do you have remote staff as well?
Majority are in person, but we do have remote staff. We have a few key people who most of the staff probably hasn't even met in person, but they integrate seamlessly. And we find that, our Slack channel of just bullshitting, the remote team members can feel really connected with their emoji language.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously right off the bat, if someone goes to your website, which we just saw, there's a swear word in the tagline.
Yeah.
So people can either that resonates with someone, a client, or a potential team member, or not, I imagine.
Yeah, it's very polarizing, and I'm okay with that. Like, some people will say, maybe you shouldn't curse. And I say, that's fine.
You're like, fuck you. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm fucking never going to change. And I know I'm not going to change. And when I don't show up that way, I fail. If I am trying to fit the mold of what others want or clients want, or what is more appropriate from different standards, then I feel like I'm just not being genuine and authentic to myself. So we had an open house probably 2 weeks ago where we opened our doors in the spring, and we had about 17 people, some who are already in their careers and searching for a new opportunity, many who are college students and trying to figure out what they want to do. And they come and spend 3 hours at our office. And it's always interesting to me to see the change in a group of strangers once they've been in our environment, and they come in their suits and, like they're or, dressed to impress. And then they spend some time with the staff and work on a project together and learn more about advertising. And you see, it's like a volume, that dial that just keeps on going up by the time the day ends, that like they're like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I love this. And that to me is the infectious part about advertising.
Katie, what are some of from a managing this process perspective, there's a lot of aspects that go into it. Do you have some favorite tools or software things that help you, or that you recommend to help teams manage the process
of talent acquisition? The biggest mistake I see a lot of people make is that they drive those job postings and they drive applicants to an applicant tracking system. And depending on what you're recruiting for, that process of filling out a job application can be cumbersome. And the more technical the job, you might need high school transcripts and college transcripts and stuff like that. So you can't even get to the point that you have a conversation with the right people, because the barrier to entry is, I see this job, I have to fill out all this shit. And no, I don't have time for that. So you have to build a landing page, and you have to build, just like we would with any advertising campaign, a quick lead generation concept, whether it's book a 15-minute screening call with a talent acquisition team member, or, send us a video. Though, treat it like how you create desire for your product or your services that you do. So we use Unbounce a lot as far as landing page development goes. Some of our clients have different platforms. LinkedIn advertising in particular is critical when you're doing workforce development and recruitment campaigns. And then I would say surrounding yourself with the right industry peers and groups and associations that you can attach yourself to get some organic traffic to a landing page. That starts actually moving the algorithm faster for us when we see people who's hitting the landing page just on their own, and we can see some demographics and start targeting in on digital platforms.
I want to talk about kind of the stages of agency growth and your agency growth, but I want to go back a little bit. Your experience and background as like a senior account manager, senior manager, you worked at PlayStation, with Sony Computer Entertainment, and then you went and became a yak farmer. Okay. So talk about that point in your life where you're make a decision to, I think you went to Peru, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Uzbekistan, wherever. What was that decision to go from, I'm a senior manager working on PlayStation to that?
I think everyone ends up on a career trajectory, and you get caught in, I'm going to do this next, and I get this opportunity, and your career can start to take a life of its own. And I have landed what was by all means my dream job, working at PlayStation. I love video games. I'm a huge nerd. I love comic books. I love all that nerd stuff. So that was my dream job. But that dream job came with a lot of personal sacrifice. I was traveling 80% of the time. It was extremely long hours at the time. It was a very difficult business to be a female in. And that was wearing me down. And I kept on having a recurring nightmare that I was going to be, 60 years old and wake up with the right side of my bed being occupied by my BlackBerry, my iPhone, and my laptop. And I didn't want that. So when you start interviewing and you get more opportunities, I just kept on saying, this is going to be the same thing. And I needed a break from it all. So I took that break and booked a one-way ticket to South America, thinking I would be gone for 6 months. When I started travel, and I was in my mid-30s when I did this. I wasn't young. Like, when I started traveling, I remember that first night in a hostel in Peru being like, I don't fucking speak Spanish. I am the oldest person staying at this hostel by more than a decade. What? And I just quit a job it was 2010. So like we were in a pretty big recession at that time. I had a stable job. And I was like, what the fuck did I just do? And you start doubting yourself. The gift that came out of that travel was I separated myself from my career in the day-to-day. In the beginning months, it was like managing a profit and loss statement and, I'm going to do a blog and I'm going to post these photos. And I did a really good job of creating work out of nothing. And then finally, I just surrendered. And that was almost a year later, it took me to Mongolia and living on the yak farm, nowhere near a connected device. The untold gift of it was that at the time social media was starting to rise. I gave up on having a blog, so I would just upload a bucket load of photos to a social media channel, and then all these old clients started calling me and following me and reaching out because, they were sitting in those corporate offices that I had been sitting in. And here I am riding elephants in Laos, or climbing mountains literally, and having all these crazy experiences. So that was probably when I first embrace the concept of an oh shit moment, because when you're traveling like that, nothing ever goes according to plan. And if you're traveling cheaply, it really doesn't go according to plan. So every time things wouldn't work out, I'd be like, well, at least this is a better story, or this is going to be a story I remember, because the stories we tell and the stories we remember are not the ones when everything went perfect as planned. It is when we had those big oh shit moments and things took a left turn. That's how I ended up in Mongolia, and that's how I ended up as a yak farmer. It was never anything I dreamt of, but I embraced those oh shit left turns, and it took me on an even better journey. And that's no different than what we do in marketing and advertising. So that's given me that ability to be comfortable with risk, that ability to make bold moves and hope for big wins on the backside of it.
You ended up traveling for about a year. What made you decide, okay, it's time to stop this part of my journey?
I journaled through the whole trip. I started daydreaming about what I wanted my life to be when I got back, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be when I left. I started missing my parents and my brother, and wanting to see them in person. And then, I had my own oh shit moments. Like, I ended up getting sick. So it was probably time to go back to a US health system at that point in time. So I came back to the US, and instead of going back to San Francisco where I had been living, I ended up getting off a plane in Rhode Island, smelling and looking like something precious, I'm sure, to my parents, with no further of a plan than, I think I'm going to hang out at my parents' house for a couple months and get my feet under me.
I was talking to a friend who just was traveling in another country, and they were saying, like, God, everything smells here. And they just realized it was themselves that they were smelling,
Yeah.
and the smell was following them around because it was them.
Yeah.
What was a crazy story from
When
the journey,
from
from that stint that you remember?
Probably one of my craziest stories is I was traveling by myself, and how I ended up on a yak farm in Mongolia is one story. But once I got there, I was there with they have reindeer in the northern part of Mongolia, and it's like on the border of Siberia. So I had this lofty idea, maybe let's go see the reindeer, which we didn't end up going see. But the family that I was staying with had a son who spoke a little bit of English and had a pot. And I had bought a tent off other travelers because I was not prepared for this, that had a leak in it. So I went and bought a shower curtain, because that's all Mongolia at the time was pretty limited in terms of gear that you could get. You could pay $200 for a sleeping bag that you might get at Walmart for $10. So it was not proper gear by any means. So I went on a trek with my Mongolian brother and another traveler, and we were gone for probably 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, never saw another human being other than the two of them, living way out wild in the steppe, like having to cook and boil water. And you would hear the animals at night. And one night It sounds like these wolves are getting like closer and closer, and I'm in this leaky tent. It's cold by myself. Like, well, if I'm gonna die, at least this is a good story. And I woke up to wolf prints right on the perimeter of my tent, like circling. And I have a photo of it. So it was an amazing.
I don't know if I could even sleep if that was the scenario, personally. Have you ever watched
Ironically,
Alone?
slept in a tent on Saturday night.
What's that?
I slept in a tent on Saturday night, this past Saturday night, and I was like, "Oh, well, I don't think I need to worry about wolves pacing outside my tent tonight."
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the show Alone.
Oh yeah.
And it seems like, I mean, they are amazingly equipped physically and mentally to do this. And it seems like a lot of them drop out because of the scare of the animals. Like
Mhm.
they could be perfectly fine, then a bear's there and they're like, I'm out. Like it's
Like the
scary.
moment when you realize you have like no protection against that is shocking and terrifying.
I'm sure you some amazing stories. That's like just a bold move. Even to do that in an environment that you're familiar with, just going out 2 weeks camping, let alone you're in Siberia with not the proper gear and everything like that is pretty wild.
Yeah.
So you get
And
back.
my daughter
Yeah.
having Danger as a middle name.
Yeah. So we'll follow on the agency growth trajectory, but is that where it comes from? Danger? Why?
Danger is my middle name.
So she gets Danger. What does she think about it?
She loves it. She owns it all day long.
That's great. Um, the next stage. So the first stage of agency growth, you come back
Mhm.
and you have a past client contact you.
Yep. I had a past client from PepsiCo call me. I had literally been in the country, I think, 3 days, and asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, right now I'm really obsessed with indoor plumbing. So I spend a lot of time taking showers and flushing toilets. Um, And that was basically the beginning. She needed help with a short-term project. I was very clear that I didn't, I wasn't moving to New York. I didn't even know if I was staying in the country. But a short-term project was perfect. And that was 14 years ago. So like that first contract grew over time. And maintained and evolved and shifted and shaped over the years, but really was that first client experience of needing to set up an LLC in like a week to be able to be a subcontractor. So I always say that when I started KSA, I really had no idea it would become what it is today. I was literally staring at indoor plumbing, fascinated, and saying, oh, okay, this is great. I can figure out what I want to be when I grow up now. And this will buy me some time.
With Pepsi, and with the company, I'm sure the services grew, the services you offer grew, and then the team grew. So with Pepsi specifically, how did the services evolve over time with what you did for them?
I was originally called because of my background in entertainment marketing, and in particular dealing with celebrities and talent, and how you leverage them on a global scale across integrated advertising campaigns, which is actually quite complex because it's a mix of legal compliance and global commercialization, and then also the advertising and marketing aspect. So that was where it started, was really my ability to blend seamlessly with teams and agencies that were producing assets, and run that interference on soccer players aren't actors. So you've got to manage your expectations when you're doing scripts. And how are you going to shoot a bunch of simplify the scenes so that what the talent is in is going to fit within the allotted time that we have in the contract and stuff. So that really was the root of it. A company like PepsiCo signs a lot of talent and does a lot of programs. As those programs got more and more complex, the legal approvals and the brand approvals and the commercialization team approvals for something like a celebrity's image on packaging was a really slow, often loose, undefined process. And then you had this rise of social media. So if you I go back to the beginning stages of my career, the likelihood of, a market like Thailand doing something with unapproved artwork from a celebrity and no one seeing it or finding it was, the risk was manageable then. Social media, everyone's going to see anything because if it's cool, they take photos of it and the talent gets access to it. So we had to tighten down how do those approvals work on a global scale. So I co-created with a client contact, sort of a way to convene all the teams and organize all those global approvals, because you can't submit TV commercials the same way you submit packaging files through any automated approval system. There's just no way. And that built out a sort of a new way of working, and we have evolved over the times with Pepsi as they've changed their marketing departments and teams and how they structure and manage creative. And we're really, an extension of their global design teams, managing all those campaigns at scale and helping to facilitate that there is cohesion and governance that's done quickly on a global scale for 100 plus markets around the world. So it started with one project helping on talent production for an upcoming shoot to now what we do, which is manage hundreds and hundreds of artwork every month through a governance process.
What talent did you need, Katie, that you had to grow on your team because of this account or other accounts?
I think the systems and the processes, how do you document stuff? How do you make it accessible to everyone? Like shout out for Airtable, as far as a database and system that was a game changer and a universal playing field that we could hack, so to say, so that people, multiple parties, multiple agencies could access. And then I had to start hiring people, in the beginning, you would be able to hire maybe young talent who just wanted the chance to work on a Pepsi. As the labor market changed, you got to hire seasoned talent and you got to pay people well. And so the financials of it are very different than what it was when I first started, because, the younger generations have different expectations as far as work-life balance. And when you're working on a global campaign and a global team, that doesn't fit into a 9-to-5 work-life balance. So how do we adjust our hiring practices, our time off practices, and all those HR pieces has been a learning curve to make sure that it's equitable across the agency.
Is Airtable, what do you use that as a project management tool, or do you use a separate software for project management?
We use ClickUp for project management. Airtable just is been so critical with record keeping for us and universal in the way that we can embed it into other systems like a ClickUp so seamlessly, gather data, monitor that data, run reports, all of it.
So it's more from like a collaboration perspective
Yeah,
between your team
collaboration
and
and
then the client that you're working with.
and visually, it just like, like we could manage things on Google Sheets, but the visual appeal of how it's organized in Airtable is second to none.
Yeah. It's interesting because I can see your company, and this is not the trajectory it took, going to other big companies and doing, there's a big need, it seems like, for celebrity and talent management.
Yeah.
And it seems like pretty sexy too.
Mhm. Yeah, it does.
So I'm curious, why did that not, you go off like, oh, great, we have
We did it
Pepsi,
for a
we could
while.
get like Frito. I don't know what brands
Yeah,
Pepsi doesn't own because they own a lot of brands, but
they own everything.
yeah.
Um, it's a great point, and we did it for a while. It's really hard to impart decades of technical, legal, not, I'm a unicorn in terms of my understanding of technical production processes, as well as legal implications and contracts and global marketing, and how you transfer that to other talent is challenging. I know a lot of what I know because I grew up through those systems and I did them firsthand. But if you haven't been on a printing press and seen all that, it's really hard for all the cogs in the wheel to connect. I also had a family, and I think you reach those shifts in your career where like celebrities require a lot of weekend work and travel and time away from my family. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to put some guardrails around what it was that I could do. So I built up a team to support the PepsiCo business. And then so I could take a step away from, the day-to-day on that and really focus on growing the agency in a different manner that wouldn't be so dependent on me and my personal expertise. Because I think, especially with Jason Swink, and as you go through any of these programs, that's how you scale, and that knowledge transfer, making sure it's not dependent just on me, was a critical turning point for the agency.
So you looked at kind of the types of accounts and types of clients and
Mhm.
what is transferable and that
Mhm.
I can manage with the team. And that one aspect is just such a special skill set that you're like, this piece of what we're doing for them maybe doesn't make sense to go
Right.
out and try and get more and more clients on it.
Right, right. And there's tons of, agencies that are trying to compete in that space too. And I'd rather create my own rules. So I just would rather build the unicorn, and have the project management and the sort of attention to detail in the systems and the processes that we have in place because of our PepsiCo business has enabled the agency to be a well-oiled machine on everything else and running integrated advertising campaigns. Now we've got it working well where they feed each other. The skills that people learn working on the Pepsi account make them better marketers.
Katie, I have one last question before I ask it. I just want to thank you for sharing your lessons, your journey. It's pretty wild journey. And I want to encourage people to check out teamksa.com to learn more. And it's just, really amazing what you've built over the years. And so much to talk about, so little time. But last question is just about some of your favorite software tech that you use with the team. I know you talked about ClickUp, you talked about Airtable. What are some of the other things?
Slack's been a game changer for us, I'm sure, as everyone is. I look at even Google Workspace, from that. The way that we stage and manage campaigns, that tech stack changes every single week is what I would say. And we have found I really appreciate Zapier in the sense of how we can connect our different tech tools into single platforms. The platforms like a ClickUp, like a Slack, where we can create a whole cohesive, integrated approach with the same tools is night and day from what it was even 4 years ago. That becomes part of our first filters as we're evaluating whether it's data sets or research that we can integrate into our campaigns for targeting.
Any resources from like from a leadership perspective, whether it's a book or, because I know like when you set out and you came back from yak farming and everything else, you weren't like, I'm going to start a company with a lot of people. And so I'm curious of what and maybe it's part of probably your background working with some of these big companies and learning from experience, but are there any resources, whether it's an Audible book or person that you follow?
Traction. Traction was, and the EOS entrepreneurial operating system was a game changer for us. That is probably my most referenced dog-eared book of all time. And the whole library, we give what the heck is EOS to every employee when they start. Everyone should read that entire suite. I did the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, which was tremendous. And especially when I was trying to pivot from, the work that we had been doing with Pepsi and similar companies towards what we're doing now with universities and government entities. So that's been a critical wealth of professional development. And then lastly, we are WeBank certified, which is a women business enterprise. And that there is an entire network of centers and resources and training programs that I get access to through my WeBank certification, which is just tremendous.
I want to echo that. What's that?
In terms of learning and constantly growing.
Yeah, I want to echo that, Katie, because so Traction, for everyone out there, Gino Wickman wrote Traction and he started EOS. I did an interview with Gino Wickman if people want to check it out, and Inspired Insider. And What the Heck is EOS is a actual book title by Gino Wickman and Tom Bauer, so people can check that out as well. And I also went through the 10KSB program, okay? So I totally agree with you on that. It's like a very cool kind of executive MBA program with Goldman Sachs. Why am I blanking on the university? That it's
Babson.
And Babson College, exactly. And you have to apply and everything, but it's actually subsidized by Goldman Sachs. So it's free for someone to go through it, which is remarkable. And it's top level professors, and I went through it during COVID when it was virtual. So like we had people from, teachers from Wharton School of Business and at Penn teaching some of the courses, and it was pretty remarkable. So thank you, Katie, for sharing that. Everyone check out teamksa.com, and we'll see everyone next time. Katie, thanks so much.
Go forth and kick some ass.
That's right.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.